And when you talked about walking through the deep sand, it got me thinking about barefoot movement. Is that something you're big into if you're doing sprints or going for walks on the beach? Are you into being barefoot to be more connected with the earth and
Totally,
yeah?
totally. But I think I've been a big fan of barefoot movement and minimalist shoes since day one. And I feel like people lose touch with the not just the earth, but the haptic sense of how their body moves when they wear cushioned shoes. I think the sort of the response to the minimalist shoe movement was this maximalist shoe movement, which has these thick rocker soles and it's horrible for the feet. It's like I think the worst thing you can do to your foot is to put it in a cast and then remove all haptic sense, all the senses that the sensory inputs that the foot gets from being barefoot. And for the longest time, I played ultimate in Vibram Five Fingers in those minimalist 5-fingered shoes, and I never rolled an ankle because I realized that even on a field with potholes in it, that as I was sprinting down the field, if I stepped on in a hole or landed on a tilted thing, before I transferred all my weight onto that foot, my brain already knew how to adjust the rest of my leg to absorb that shock or that roll. And every time I did that, every time I would run on an uneven surface that way, my feet got stronger and stronger. The small muscles of my feet became much stronger than they ever could have wearing cleats or even regular what we might call tennis or running shoes. So I've been a huge fan of people going barefoot, and I to this day I just kind of roll my eyes when people say, "Well, I couldn't go barefoot or I couldn't wear a sort of minimalist shoes because I have no arches." Well, the reason you have no arches is because you've been supporting your arch with an artificial bridge your whole life. And so your arch has atrophied. It's given up the ghost. It said, I don't need to work anymore. The only way to build arches, not the only way, but the best way is to walk barefoot as much as you can. So one of the ways to do that is to walk, in the shallow water, if it's warm water, on a coastal flat plain, or in deep sand is another way to do it. I do sprints barefoot. And even though I had an issue with my feet a couple of years ago where I actually tore my plantar plate doing sprints. And so I had to wear cleats just for the stiffness of the shoe, just to be able to get around on a Frisbee field. I didn't want to give up Frisbee, right? So I had to alter my footwear. But once the plantar plate repaired itself, I went back to doing sprints only in minimalist shoes because I want that haptic sense, and I want the feet. It's as an aside, I ran from the age of like 14. I was a runner, and when I started running in probably 1967 or 68, there were not many shoes available, and the shoes that were available were very thin-soled shoes. And the effect of those thin-soled shoes was you couldn't run that many miles in a week because it was tough on the feet. It was tough on, you were limited in your mileage to the small muscles in your feet and their ability to recover from one day to the next from putting in miles. In the late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s, the thickness of the shoes started to increase. And then Nike came up with these waffle trainers and these Nike LDVs, which were like almost an inch thick. And then New Balance came out with shoes. There were a number of shoe companies, Adidas and Pumas, and they all came out with thick-soled shoes. And the running boom took off, and people started putting in 80, 90, 100 miles a week, 120 miles a week. And the irony here is that because these shoes were cushioning the footfall and the small muscles of the feet ceased to become the limiting factor in injuries, and it bypassed that important haptic sense and put all of the pressure on the quads and the calves and the quads and the hamstrings and in many cases the glutes, and all the way up to the lower back. And so people started getting different kinds of injuries, but the same kind of injuries. So that the irony with these high-tech shoes is that the amount of injuries did not decrease over time. Just where the injury was got moved further up the leg, all because somebody thought it was a great idea to cushion the feet and cushion the footfall and kind of remove that natural ability that we have wired to us to adjust our stride to accommodate that sensory input.
And it seems like the running world in general is making a comeback towards the more minimalistic.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the lighter weight shoes, the minimalist shoe is now sort of a combination of lightweight, thinner sole, but also that sole now has some kinetic forces built into it. So the sole itself, if you were a great runner and you're landing on your midfoot, the way the sole is constructed now, it absorbs the energy and transfers it immediately to the next push off. So there's been discussion in the running shoe circles about whether that might even be an unfair advantage to people who are wearing those types of shoes. It's one of the shoes that was used to break 2 hours in the marathon recently. So it's now the recognition is that, yeah, you want to utilize as much of the foot as possible, and that works really well for an elite runner who's probably been running a lot barefoot to begin with and trained, the small muscles of their feet and trained their Achilles to be that spring-loaded action. Meanwhile, I think a lot of people are still who are what we call citizen runners or joggers or people who are maybe overweight trying to run to lose weight. They're still, I think, flocking toward that maximalist shoe because of the cushioning that it offers.